Good talk so far. Thank you to everyone who's been up. Next up, we have my friend and colleague and also founder and investee of Gradient, Vu Van. It's been fun. We've now known each other for 7 or 8 years. We invested in Vu's company back in 2018. She founded ELSA in 2016. So she's been at it now for 9 years. Vu was born in Vietnam and graduated valedictorian of the Foreign Trade University in Hanoi. And she later attended Stanford Business School. She worked as a consultant and had a career before starting ELSA. But yeah, for the last 9 years, it's been the passion project. And really, ELSA is an interesting, consumer application usage of AI that was really kind of early to its time. I think people don't realize or haven't grokked that really for 8 years you could speak to an ELSA tutor and learn how to better speak English language, which is pretty cool. But it also has meant that Vu's company has grown up with the evolution of AI, and that means as models change quickly and this space has changed so quickly, she's adapted to a lot of change. So really excited about this conversation and explaining more about how that's all evolved. But thank you, Vu, for joining us.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you for having me.
So cool. So starting off, just can you tell us a little bit about what led you to found ELSA and your founding story?
Yeah, so started again 9 years now. And it was very early in the days where using AI to help people to learn to speak better English was a very new concept that people were very skeptical because there's still a lot of just around teachers teaching you to speak better English. And the reason why I started ELSA was born and raised in Vietnam, had never really had challenge or trouble with English on paper, right? So as an Asian, you probably know we're very good at taking tests and always acing all of the tests, and still do. But as I started moving abroad, living in Denmark and working there, and then moved to the States, that's when communication became a real challenge for me, right? People had a really hard time understanding you. There's a lot of incidents or just scenarios where you felt misunderstood or misheard or just ignored. Just not because people are being rude or impolite, it's just people had a harder time understanding your English. And so that really hurt your confidence. And so for the long time when I was at Stanford, I actually had a private speaking coach really help me with my speaking challenges and really listen to me and talk to me and figure out where I did speak incorrectly so that they can provide the feedback. And so based on that experience, I realized that, hey, there's a lot more people like me out there. When I was in consulting, you know how, again, being an Asian, it's like you're really good at Excel modeling, and there was a time where LLM did not do your modeling. You had to do your own modeling. And so I actually went up to my partner and say, I'm like only do model for 6 months. And then I said, I'm going to do presentation. Because otherwise you're going to be stuck at building modeling and then leave the presentation to all of your colleagues who are Americans who are much better in communication than you are. So that's why we really believe that if we can democratize that access to that private speaking coach that I had to really help people unlock that confidence as they speak English, but using AI, because I really believe that human can really bring that solution to 1 billion people around the world, then that would really solve the problem. So that's why we started out building that solution 9 years ago, really believing that if I have a private speaking coach with you, but it's available, scalable 24/7, that doesn't judge who you are, that will really solve the problem for people.
Yeah, I think it's an awesome mission and one of those things you experienced yourself. For people's benefit, I think one interesting thing is that while, of course, there's a diversity of languages spoken around the world, there's like half of the world basically is either speaking English or aspirationally wants to learn English. So it is the dominant language for business. It's the dominant language that everyone wants to learn. And so most of the spend that people spend on, whether it be schooling or language learning tools like Duolingo or Babbel or others, literally half of the market is just English language learning. So it's a really critical part of people's lives. And for many people, it has up-leveled their employment opportunities across the world. So some real do-good elements to this opportunity. Can we flash back? I think it's important for people to realize, because right now, this feels like the space is changing really quickly. actually feels like, looking back, it's changed pretty quickly for the last several years. But it's helpful to think both where we've come from and what that probably means where we're going, and how quickly and what will be performant in terms of AI models in 5 years. Can we flash back to 2018 or 2017 about what did it really take to build an AI company back then? I think, for instance, you had a research team within your team just in order to develop models. Can you talk to?
Yeah, so when we started out, because we want to build a technology that understands people who speak English from different parts of the world, that ASR, automatic speech recognizer technology back then was very much bare bone. There's no API for you to plug in like right now, right? The old technology, there's Google ASR, there's Siri ASR, and there's Alexa. Now, the challenge is when we actually started out plugging those models is that they had a really hard time understanding our language learners community because they speak really bad English. That's why they need help, right? These technology were built for American, for native speakers, and so they understood Americans really well, but not for accented English. So we actually really scratched that API plugin at the early days, and we built all of this ASR technology internally. So at the beginning of the journey, the early days, we actually put out an app for free where we can get learners to download the product from around the world so that we can collect all of this voice data from different accents. Then we label all of this data, and then we train our own ASR. And we have a country-specific model where we have, like, with that accent, here's the model so that we can fine-tune it. And then eventually have an ASR that's really, really fine-tuned and adapt to different accents around the world. And it's still proprietary for us right now. And it was a big effort. So we actually didn't start with an engineering team. We just start with AI research team, NLP, and ASR people, and including my co-founder, who's an ASR expert. And then eventually, once we had the technology, we spent a long time building the technology itself, right? Right now, you can just plug in, so it cut short by 2 years. But we did spend about 2 years having a free application out there, because without the data, there's nothing we can train the model. And then from there on, then our AI scientists would then be the one that build the application before we actually build an engineering team ourselves.
Yeah, and Vu literally recruited a co-founder from Portugal who had led a career as like a professor in ASR, computer recognized speech, and then he recruited a research team. So you used to have to go full stack, your own research team, your own data analysis and data labeling, then your own model, and then you could finally deliver, a mobile application that had a good user experience. So compare that or contrast that to today and like all the API offerings and all those things. How has that sort of technology stack changed over time, and how has that meant you've had to change the skill sets on your team? Like, I think it relates from everything from, what your product can present, what your technology stack looks like behind that, and then what team enables success.
Yeah, so a lot have changed. Again, 8 years ago, as Zach mentioned, we have a full stack we have our data labeling team. We have linguistic, just to label the data. We have all of our ASR, NLP researchers to build all of that model internally. Right, and so then we have an engineering team separately to build the application layer on top of it. So just imagine we actually build the API so that the mobile developers can call into our own API. And now that's just the layer that you call into other APIs. So we have a dedicated team doing that. Now, I think as fast forwards, even the last 2-3 years, we have to dramatically change the way how we operate, because the biggest decision and the challenge coming from our environment is buy versus build, right? These scientists, they love building, but we had the luxury of time, and the downside of the time. It means that 8 years ago, everything we built takes 6 months, and it's a binary outcome. It might not work, it might work, right? I went to my scientists, I'm like, what's your timeline estimate? I said, I don't know, it's done when it's done. Because they came from a 5 years research PhD project, it's done when it's done. And then when it came out, I said, sorry, it didn't work, we're gonna try again. But because back then we also did not have a lot of competition. We were the only one out there that built it. I still remember going to Zach, and it's like, for the investment, it's like, but what if Google built it? I'm like, I don't know. You tell me, you're part of Google team, right? But we were the only one that built it ourselves. And so we had no fear of competition, but building those give us that moat, that technology that we talked about before. Now, moving away from that, I remember the transition between OpenAI coming out and us. We actually were building the conversational AI model internally, of course, at a very different quality. And my team, I think you remember, my team was still like, but our model works really well for our use case. And I had to really push and say, I think it's going to be very late. I think we got to plug in right away, right? And so that fight between build versus buy has changed a lot, right? Like our AI scientists become AI engineers now. They have to really change the mentality. We don't have that 6 months luxury of building and testing something internally anymore, but we still have to hold on to certain mode. And so identify what mode, what differentiate you, what you hold on to versus what you build has really changed the way how we operate now.
Yeah. And I think being robust to that change, both in terms of making technology decisions, but also like people decisions, is something everyone should contemplate, because I mean, it's hard to imagine that, you know, the tech capabilities that you're relying on today aren't going to change pretty quickly. And just to put a point on the question, like in terms of the people management part of it, would you say that's hard or easy?
Oh, that's never easy. I think Zach at the beginning, I think eventually as you started having a company a little older, I was talking to some founders and they said, I have 5 people. I said, I really love it. I really miss that time having 5 people, because you have a lot less people problem than we do right now. And most of the time I spent on even going to the board is like, I have this people problem, like help me out with this people problem, right? And so I think that was really hard, because again, you have to change the entire process. The way how you run your decision, your sprint process, the people behind it, they're very resisting, right? Especially, I don't know, I won't offend the scientists here, but the scientists are the hardest one to change. They really hold on to their ideas and the way how they work, and refusing the world is going out. I actually just came back from the World Economic Forum just the other day, and they said like, they're even team, like old school scientists that sabotage the result of AI. That if you're not careful enough, that's happened. So it's very hard to change that, but you really have to bring them up and say, eventually we're not criticizing your work. Eventually we want to see where your technology, where your talent makes sense, so that you can plug in all of this technology these days. So I think that was the biggest change for us going internally, is how do we move our AI scientist team into more AI engineering, and see the benefit of plugging other technology instead of trying to say that our technology is always better. Yep. And that's still an ongoing process, because there's too many changes going on right now. Right?
Yeah, I have to say, from, you know, obviously from the board level, we're at a higher level. This is one of those things where you see a business that like executes, right? ELSA serves hundreds of thousands of users across the globe. You know,
60 million.
60 million. Millions of users around there. Hundreds of thousands of paid, maybe, is the
That's right.
But the revenue growth chart, the user growth chart, like all that stuff up and to the right throughout all the time, the product just getting better and better, and more engagement. And yet underneath the hood, you're talking about like substantial technological migrations and transitions, substantial people changes. Like, so it's one of those things that if you just looked at the board decks, you would just totally miss how much adaptation that has required. So kudos to you on that. I mean, it's impressive. What about rolling forward? I mean, just for everyone's benefit, like this is a tutor that will help you learn the English language and you get to speak to it. And it started with helping with pronunciation, but now it can do, which is kind of the last mile of learning, right? You have to already know your vocabulary and already know how to structure sentences. But it's moved backwards to be able to do much more dynamic conversational things and free form conversations, and monitor your speech while you're on a meeting and help coach you after the fact about things that you might work on or ways you could have made a point better. So it's done a ton. It's really cool. But rolling forward, like what is your sort of vision for where you think, you know, AI in terms of this type of support for teaching people or language learning will go?
Yeah, so I think, again, the last few years we have really, the product had gone through a big evolution, right? I think we also have now an enterprise training solution where we actually work with companies to train the workforce in speaking better English, but having much better communication skill overall. We used to talk about, when we go to companies, the only metrics they talk about is engagement, right? How much time do the employees spend on learning English? Now we can actually go to them and say, what is the ROI that we can deliver for you, right? Because it's not just so much about your pronunciation anymore. It's about your conflict resolution skill, your customers negotiation skill that we can measure. We work with call centers and we say, hey, if we can train you, we have all of this simulated learning scenario that we can throw you into a conversation when angry customers calling in, how would you respond, and whether you escalate that anger even more or you de-escalate that anger, and the time that it takes, like how many turns that it takes for you to reduce that. So we can actually measure all of that communication outcome now. And so that's what I'm very excited going forward is how do we really measure on the outcomes of communication versus just a technicality of, oh, you have to learn English so that people can understand you more. I think I was just talking with a founder here and they said, are you selling to CSR as a company benefit or are we selling to other people? And he said, the good thing is that we don't sell it as a benefit. Benefit has a negative connotation is that it's good to use, but it's okay not to use it because it's a benefit for you. We actually go sell to department and head a business unit where we say, this is the outcome. We can show you an ROI of $500,000 a year. Why would you not invest in the solution, right? And so that's what I'm very excited for the company where we're going. We now plug into meetings for people. I think I shared with you at the board. We basically offer we call it ELSA Whisper, but it's a cheat sheet, right? Like, hey, if somebody in your meeting asks you, like, hey, do you have any ideas on how you can expand this market? We're gonna have some whispering tool that can tell you all of the ideas so that you can speak out loud. Now imagine these people who don't speak English on a daily basis. Asking them to think and brainstorm on the fly is extremely hard for English. And so we offer all of these tools that can help you communicate better. And so that's where I'm very excited, and that's where all of the latest technology allowing us to do it. I think we were actually the first in the market to go out with all of this, they call it role play scenario planning right now. You probably see a lot. You see OpenAI even demo that technology, or you can start role play. We actually came out way ahead of that with that role play technology because we built it as a long time, right? And then when OpenAI come in, we just plug in so that we have a much better quality of the role play. But we actually had been cooking up that technology for years before it came out.
Yeah, it's really cool. Actually, I want to quickly diverge. The other thing about ELSA is that it started as a consumer app, right? So it's a consumer business to the tune of millions and millions of users and tens of millions of revenue as a consumer app. And then now we're B2B business as well, and that B2B business is growing really quickly. And so transforming a business from a consumer business to also having a B2B offering is its own iteration. And comes with its own challenges. And by the way, changing the org as well, because you have to have an actual sales team to go to market for, and ELSA sells across the globe. So they were talking about go-to-market teams in Japan and in Vietnam and on. Just quickly, like any reflections on building a consumer business versus a B2B business? Is one harder than the other, or one?
Equally hard, I would say. But I think they have different challenge. Consumer business, you can scale, you can tune up your scaling really fast if you pump the money in marketing, right? And then you can tone it down. But they have their own set of challenges, retention, right? People try to download it and then go away, and you have to really find a way to hold on to them. B2B is a lot slower at scale at the beginning, right? Because you have to build all of the sales motion, but the stickiness is there. B2B, we don't have a problem with retention. We usually do a land and expand strategy. So it's a very different mindset. But during the transition time, between going from a B2C to now offering B2B, there was a lot of confusion in the organization. Now we abandoned B2C, or we now moving to B2B, and it was a lot of change management around that, right? Like, hey, how do we make sure that the team is not confused about where we're going? And then how do we make sure that the markets know what we're doing? And then all of the infrastructure around that, how do you prioritize, right? Like when you go to B2B, you have to do SOC 2 compliance and all of this one, and we never had that infrastructure before. So there was a huge change management process to go from a consumer and now offering B2B. But the consumer is still our flywheel because, Zach already know, but we have most of our clients, if not all of our B2B clients, come from consumer. Because when we go to them, they already use the product themselves, or they have seen like 20, 30 employees using it. So without the consumer flywheel, we will have to spend a lot more money in marketing on B2B. So we have that benefit of like basically synergy between B2C and B2B. So it's really important for us. But on the team side, they don't see a lot of that benefit, right? So they see it more binary. So it's a lot more for us to make sure that the team change management is there, and then they understand the vision of the company.
Absolutely. It is cool now that, this consumer business helps build the brand and the notoriety and kind of bottoms up sales into businesses. But I don't know if we have another business that would have as much B2B and B2C. There's not a lot of businesses that cross that chasm. So last thing, question I just like to ask of founders that have reached the later stages to help, with founders that are in different stages. What do you wish you knew, or what do you know now that you wish you knew then? What is any main learning that you would go tap on Vu of 2018 and say, here's what you should be thinking about more?
I think, so much now that I wish I known back then. Now, would I do it differently? Probably not, right? But I didn't know that all of this technology existed and we had to build everything from scratch, right? It took years of building it. We even built our own text-to-speech voice model, right? So that we can clone the voice, and then we had to then offer it, because at the beginning we have voice in the app, it's human voice, but we have a human voice artist that actually recorded every single lesson. Actually, it was my husband initially recording it because we didn't have money to pay for it. So just going back, right? And we built all of that technology. If I had known that, hey, within a year, OpenAI would release all of this model that you can clone your voice. Would I have built that text-to-speech technology initially? Probably not. But then I had to wait for a year, and then we're not first in the market in all of that one. So I wish that I knew that AI would be going that fast, but I don't think a lot could have changed what we did. I think definitely people, right? I think, how do you make sure, I think we scale and grow globally, but that come with a lot of challenges, right? Culture differently. I think we talk about culture for one team. We have, 6 different offices now. So we talk about 6 different cultures combining into one culture is really hard for us. And so I think what Zach mentioned at the beginning, if I was second-time founder, I would have invested a lot more in just building culture so that we don't have 6 different cultures and we have to merge into one culture. Because once it's set and going, it's very hard for you to roll it back. And so investing a lot more time in people, processes. We had 6 different OKR systems because all of the team running OKR, and then we have to now roll it back because it's that one global OKR system. Performance management review is also very hard. So I think as we started growing globally, we would have loved, if I known that it got that complex, I would have set up a lot of process at the beginning, the people process at the beginning, before we actually scale. Now, the way how we do is we see that big opportunity in Japan, let's go into Japan. If the team had waited for me to figure out all this process, we probably missed the market, right? So we sort of let the market lead us, and then process kind of afterthought that goes later. But as you scale, it started giving you a lot of challenges and headaches, which is what I spend most of my time on these days. Makes sense. Another founder harping on the company building aspect, I think, in the people aspect of what it takes once you're really scaling out. So thank you, Vu. Really appreciate it. People who have questions about this stuff, please find Vu in breaks and stuff like that. She also loves to help a fellow founder, and appreciate it very much. Thank you so much.